This is Beyond the Culture. Let's go. I'm so excited that you took the time to join us on the next episode of Beyond the Culture. This is the show where we embrace change and challenge cultural norms and ideals. I'm your host, Dr. David Walker. In this episode of Beyond the Culture, this is a post-election show. As you are aware, on November the 3rd, America went to the ballot box to vote for the next president of the United States. And if you've been paying attention to the news, this year's election was an election like never before. As a matter of fact, we did not get the outcome of the election until this past weekend. I believe it may be Saturday or Sunday. We finally were determined, it was determined who is going to be the winner of this year's election. But let me just give you a couple of facts and then we'll go further. This year, over 146 million people went to the polls and casted their vote. And I think that that is probably the most exciting aspect of this year's election, because for months we have been talking about get the vote out, and that the greatest thing in this American democracy is that your voice has a right to be heard. And the only way for your voice to be heard is to go to the ballot box and cast your vote. So well over 146 million people casted their vote for presidency and vice presidents of the United States. And so we do have, according to all reports, we have a winner. And the winner this year is none other than former vice president, who is now President-elect Joseph R. Biden, and his running mate, Senator, and now we can call her Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. They will take over the White House beginning January the 20th, 2021. But I do want to make something very, very clear, that although President-elect Biden has received the majority of the electoral votes, we know that to be nominated the president, you have to win at least 270 votes. And right now, as of today, the count is 290 for Joe Biden and 214 for President Trump. Now, even though those are the numbers, according to election rules, the states still have to certify the election. And that's not going to take place for another couple of weeks. But generally speaking, once it is projected that you are the winner of the election by achieving at least 270 votes, you will be the new president beginning January 2021. All right. So today I wanted to come and have a conversation. And I've asked a couple of guests to come on the show, and we wanted just to have a conversation about the election, just to kind of get our thoughts out, because it was very difficult. I mean, tempers were high, emotions were high, and it was a tough, hard fight. But today I want to have a conversation about it. So I've asked two friends to come on today and to join this conversation. Now, this first gentleman, he's been on the show before, and I've asked him to come back and to be with us today. His name is the Reverend Tyrone Stevenson. And as you know, he is the pastor of Hope City Church, and that's in Brooklyn, New York. And he is the author of The Day My Daddy Died. And I do want to make note that he is just short of earning his Doctor of Ministry degree. And so in just a short period of time, we'll be referring to my friend as Dr. Stevenson. We also have with us today, and this is a first-time guest, and I'm really excited of having this gentleman on because he's also a school buddy of mine, just like Reverend Stevenson. Reverend Stevenson and I went to seminary together, but this particular gentleman that I have on today, him and I we were earning our doctorate degrees at the same time. I got out a little bit ahead of him, but he just soon and very soon, he's going to be earning his doctorate degree in education. So I have my friend today, Reverend Jaron Green, and he is the pastor of Union Baptist Church, and that's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And again, I said that he is the near completion of his doctorate degree, and we'll be looking forward to calling him Dr. Green. So those are my guests today, and I want to welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. So glad to be here with you two distinguished thinkers. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
I echo that thanks as well.
All right. So let's go here. And as I did in my introduction, this was a very difficult election, and it was hard fought. It went down to the end. Matter of fact, in the sports vernacular, it went overtime because the election ended on, or at least election night ended on Tuesday, but the official pronouncement of the new president didn't come. I think it was either Saturday night or definitely on Sunday, but it was 4 or 5 days of the election. Somebody said for the very first time, we'll go from election day to at least election week. And some even said it could have been election month. But we know the numbers are in. And so generally, I want to start off this conversation with the two of you. And just to get your general election thoughts, just your general thoughts on the election this year. Let's start with Reverend Stevenson.
Generally, I think that democracy won.
Okay.
The whole idea of the number of people, the sheer number of people who voted, that says so much about where we are as a country. The increase of votes for Donald Trump is a result of the Republican Party increasing their voter rolls. So that's what that is. Then you have Joe Biden receiving more votes than any president in history.
Yes,
it's unbelievable that the engagement of the country. So that's probably the biggest win for me, is that democracy really showed itself and reared its head, and also showed how this can really be done in a way to benefit the country going forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because in my opening, I said it was a total of 146 million votes. Joe Biden received about greater than 74 million. And President Donald Trump received at least 71 million. And when you add that together, that's at least 146 million. So what that tells us is that it tells us that democracy works.
Yep.
You know, that the people got out there and they casted their vote. And I think that that's, if nothing else, regardless of whether or not your candidate won, I think that that's the greater significance in this election, is that the people got out and vote. So Reverend Green, tell us about just give us your general thoughts on the election.
Well, I will certainly echo what Brother Stevenson has said, that democracy did win. This was an election that was most likely the most important election of our modern day. The world is in the midst of facing its worst humanitarian crisis, some say since World War II. Around the world, you have people who are forcibly displaced from their home, either from natural disaster or government disaster. Then, of course, we have COVID-19 that hits our most vulnerable communities in the United States and around the world. the cases. I mean, I can spit some statistics to you, but we know that this number's been thrown out over and over again. 230,000 citizens of the United States have passed away from COVID. So this was an important election. And in 2016, since 2016, the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania has been trying to get reelected, but he's done it from the standpoint of marginalization, rolling back certain protections. And so when we finally get to November 3rd, and then after several days of counting votes, we finally get to this point where there is a declared change, I believe that there's a sigh of relief that's heard around the world. It's heard around the world. There's dancing in the streets. There's folks in my neighborhood, and yes, right out of my own living room, hollering and screaming out the window and happy about change. Now, my hope has never been in government itself.
Sure.
My hope is in Jesus, because I'm saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost. I'm a preacher. My hope is in Jesus alone. However, it's something to be said when a leader speaks up. When a real leader speaks up and stands up, the world listens. The world listens. So those are my some of my initial thoughts.
You know, you brought up COVID-19, and I want to just kind of throw this into the conversation right away. This morning, President-elect Biden gave out his, as a part of his transition team, I think he's calling it his COVID-19 advisory board, where he's got a panel of doctors together, and they are going to be the ones to help him fight this COVID crisis. And I thought that, and I'm bringing that up because Reverend Green talked about leadership. And I think that was one of the things that was wanting over the past few years. And I will say this, I don't think that regardless of who was the president, they would not have had a struggle with battling the COVID crisis. I don't care who was in office. That was a major, major struggle. However, when as Reverend Green said, when you talk about leadership, you're talking about taking crises and then grabbing it by the horn, so to speak, and not causing alarm, but begin to detail steps that we could all work together, and we can battle this crisis, no matter how difficult it may seem to us. Together, we can battle it, and I believe we'll win in the end. I still think there would have been a lot of deaths, but I think you would have minimized the number majorly by having a better strategy for handling the disease. So I brought up Joe Biden because just today he announced this committee, or this advisory board, that they're going to advise him with science through bringing America back from the COVID crisis. And Joe Biden said, I don't want to shut down America, but I do want to shut down the virus. So I thought that was notable of him.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Based on what you just said, here's something that I believe, and I really believe this. I agree, no matter who the president would have been, this challenge was overwhelming.
Yes.
It was overwhelming. And here's what I will say, and I believe this, and some of my friends, they have a little problem with this statement, but I believe the statement I'm about to make. Had President Trump taken this bull by the horn in February, we would be welcoming President Donald Trump to his second term in office. I do not think anyone could have beaten him. One, because he would have been able to run on the economy and say the economy is messed up because of the virus. If he had taken strong measures in the beginning, number one, his base would have listened. Yes. They follow him like a cult leader. He said in February, put on a mask. They would have put on a mask. He would have had that kind of control. we'd still be, I think, where we are, where the virus is coming, the vaccine is coming around, and Pfizer has announced some big things today. I just think that it would have worked in his favor. It was the lack of leadership. Then you add all the other stuff. The lack of leadership on this is what brought people together. So if his economic policies, you didn't appreciate them, those who did appreciate them thought he was leading.
Right.
If you look at what he did with jobs, if you didn't appreciate it, you didn't think he led. But those who did appreciate it, they thought he was leading. When you look at his response to the virus, even supporters of his say he's not leading well here. So the thing that brought people together, in my opinion, was, besides the fact that he's just, all the things he says, we put that aside, the fact that people could agree where he wasn't leading. I believe everything rises and falls on leadership. I really believe it. I really believe it.
That's
Reverend
absolutely
Green,
correct.
do you agree with that? Do you agree with what Pastor Stevenson just said?
Unfortunately, I have to agree. And I don't say unfortunately because I don't want to agree with my good brother. I don't want to agree that Trump had a chance. But as we know, it was scary in some states where we were counting down, one for you, one for him, one for you, one for him. So it's clear that President Trump could have been reelected.
Yes.
But what I love about President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris is that they have named their transition somewhere around the sorts of restoring leadership, restoring what leadership looks like. So in their transition, they get to now prioritize all of the things that the current occupant refused to prioritize. So it's almost like they get to prioritize core values that we've seen as Americans, that we thought was a morality. So you've got diversity of ideology and background, and they've got talent that they're pushing to the front. They're looking at people who actually have expertise in subject matter to be part of leading the population. What a concept. You actually want somebody who knows what they're talking about to lead in areas. So you want scientists, you want doctors, you want the former Surgeon General to actually lead a response to COVID. I've always been very curious as to what was in President Obama's playbook. They've referred to this pandemic playbook that President Trump threw away. Maybe he needs to go and get it out the trash can and then try to do a recount after that. But you can't rewind the clock at this point. You just can't rewind the clock.
Yeah. And I do agree, because watch this. Historically, the incumbent had all the weight of the first term. That's why if I'm not mistaken, this election that Donald Trump has lost, this may be only the third time in history that an incumbent president, or maybe it's happened 3 times already, and then Biden makes it the 4th, where the incumbent president lost in the first term. So you had 46 presidents, and to be more accurate, 45, because Grover Cleveland won twice and he gets 2 numbers. That's just a historical fact. Look it up.
From an educator.
There you go. But from a historical perspective, the weight of the energy of winning an election is always based on the first term. So President Trump had all the weight for a second term. And I think, as Pastor Stevenson said, if his leadership response would have been different, it would have swayed not the 71 who voted for him, because they would have voted for him anyway. But it's that 4.5 that voted for Biden. That's the ones who might have been swayed to stick with, because the economy, at least what the media was showing us, the economy was working well. I'm sure there'd be some people who will push back on that, but at least that was the narrative he was given. The economy was working well, and if COVID hadn't happened, I would be in my second term. But even though COVID did happen, I think that with better leadership, he may have carried the weight of the first term into a second. Although I do agree with Pastor Green that he definitely didn't have the leadership skills, the administration skills to bring people together in a collaborative effort in the midst of crisis in order to win. But sometimes when it comes to American voting, the things that make sense don't make sense to people.
I love the word you use, Dr. Walker. I love the word you use, weight, the weight of it. It should have been the platform for him to propel to his second term.
Right.
But instead of propelling, his first year weighed him down.
Wow.
So let me tell you what the weight is. The weight holding him down. It's the immigrants. It's the women.
Yes.
It's the LGBTQ people.
Yeah.
It's every person of color, every person of minority faith. When you're banning humans from coming into a place that's supposed to be a free land. Yeah. And not only that, you are dealing with the weight of, I'm just gonna say it, true Christians. True Christians. Not this new Christianity.
He went there.
Not this new Christianity. I'm not gonna put any denomination or faith on it or whatever you want to call it or category. But true Christians look out for the poor, look out for the widow, look out for the orphan, and they're more concerned about life outside of the womb than just the ones inside of the womb. That's the weight that stopped this current occupant from becoming president once again. And I said, thank you, Jesus.
You are so right. And I love the way you did that play on words on the word weight, because it goes both ways, but it depends on how you use the weight, basically. And you're right. You referenced the biblical text, Matthew 25. When I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. And when you are a true Christian, check this out. I was listening, and now I'm just kind of throwing this. I'm digressing a little bit, as they say. We got this argument between the words Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And the other day, in reference to that scripture, Matthew 25, Jesus, in a couple of words, said, "When you do this to the least of these, you've done it unto me." Isn't that what he said? I got preachers on here, so I know I'm in the word.
That's what he said, Doctor. You're in the word. You're in the word.
Notice he didn't say that's the Lord. And again, let's just see who he was talking about. He was talking about the poor, the oppressed, the afflicted, those taken advantage of. He was saying, when you do this to the least of these, you do it to me. Notice he didn't say when you do it to all people. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So there are times when the Lord sends the message of selectivity. And that's why whenever we use the term Black Lives Matter, we are not excluding that all lives don't matter. And it's amazing that people cannot understand that. But all we're trying to do is to build up identity, build up, inspiration, say that we matter too, because the way things look, we don't matter. So Black Lives Matter. And I appreciate those, especially that are not of this hue, who understand that. I got a guy in my neighborhood, got a big Black Lives Matter sign up. I say, go ahead, brother Caucasian. Because, he understood that when you do it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. That's what Jesus said.
I think that one of the challenges I have, and I think we live in similar communities, Dr. Walker, and everybody wants to talk to me. Bottom line, we're the only people of color that live in our community.
Right,
and
right.
everyone wants to talk to me after a death or after a police shooting, and the concept that, but all lives should matter, Tyrone. And I had to say to one of my dear neighbors, I said, therein lies your supremacy.
Mm.
And obviously they looked at me like, what? I said, let me ask you a question. If my son was in my pool and my son drowned, and I called the police, the ambulance, and they rush here to save my son, and your son was here at my pool, and your son fell and cut his leg.
Mm.
Would you think it would make sense for you to say to the ambulance, don't resuscitate Tyrone's son? My son hurt his leg, fix my son's leg. He said, of course not. That's ridiculous. I said, but that's exactly what's happening. Black America is dying.
Mm.
And what you want to say is, okay, no. I hear you, but that's not that important.
Right.
What we think is important is what's important. So if all lives mattered, we would never have to say Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And truthfully, sadly, many people wrestle with their supremacy and their supremic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think that they're supremacists. They don't think so until you like listen. But the fact that you are saying and you're so angry that we're calling attention to a group of people who don't look like you. It is to say, every time you say all lives matters, all of those of us who are educated, what we hear is, you don't want our life to matter as much as you think your life matters. That's really what it gets down to. And so the concept really speaks to a person's internal thoughts of supremacy. It really does. Because does all lives matter? Yeah, but you don't even believe that. And we kept the conversation going because they got a little heated. And I'm not the kind to back down from conversation. I said, you don't believe that all lives matter. Mm-hmm. I said, you give more weight to fighting for the unborn. Mm-hmm. So do I.
Right.
I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to give the same weight to the 8-year-old boy who's in school and can't read, who we're also giving a death sentence to in the next 5 years when he goes to jail.
Mm.
Do you see
a space for him?
Exactly.
By third grade in the local penitentiary.
And the concept, he's like, but they're not the same. Why are they not the same? He says, well, because the unborn baby can't speak for themselves. I said, I get it. Mm-hmm. I said, and the 5-year-old can? So the 5-year-old who's malnourished because mom doesn't have enough money. Mm-hmm. And now they're malnourished, and they've been malnourished for 5 years. Then we put them in school and understand that malnutrition affects brain capacity. And what we do, we have to understand this all together. So then you say the humane thing is to build prisons so at least they have a place. And you don't understand what you're saying. Your policies show your supremacy. And so, I mean, he hasn't spoken to me since then, but, you know.
I think he'll be all right. I think he'll be all right. It's kind of interesting. You mentioned, these two phrases that are at war now, although they shouldn't be. Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. What it really shows is the condition of the heart. Mm-hmm. What it shows is messaging that's passed down generation after generation. I think that's why folks were so upset and up in arms about this latest Supreme Court justice, if we want to call it that at this point, being pushed through Senate, because the decisions over the last 4 years could take as long as 60 years, 6 decades to begin to correct. If you look back in history, guys, 1896, Supreme Court delivered a separate but equal verdict in Plessy versus Ferguson.
That's right.
It didn't get turned over, if you will, until 58 years later with Brown versus Board of Education.
Right.
And that only starts the process of ending segregation in 1954, only starts it, because you can't legislate hard. So what happens during that time in those almost 6 decades? Well, Black families are telling their kids one thing, white families are telling their children something else. We're saying that all men are created equal, and they're saying it's separate but equal. And so now you got Black Lives Matter versus all lives matter. And what I'm saying is, Lord, deliver us from evil.
Right.
which would take care of all of it, because that's the issue. It's our hearts. Absolutely.
And here's something. I was just, when you said all lives matter, if all lives matter, we wouldn't have the discussion. Something, and I just wrote this down. I said, if all lives matters, we wouldn't have Black colleges and universities. If all lives matters, we wouldn't have had the Negro Baseball League. If all lives matter, we would have never had a Miss Black America. If all lives matter, we would have never had the NAACP. If all lives matter, we've never had a need for the National Black Caucus. Why have we had all of these entities with the name Black on it? Is because their lives didn't matter at a time. Mm-hmm. So you had to have your own. You've always had to put your name on it, because otherwise, if you don't, they're not going to give you space. They're not going to give you opportunity. Sure. So you have to go to that road. You have to stand up for yourself. And when we say all Black lives matter, or say loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, the majority of the language is really for Black self-esteem and mm-hmm. uplift. That's really what it's for. We want to uplift our people. And so that's the kind of language that's used, so that way we can say we're here too, we're somebody too, we're significant too. So Black lives matter.
Yeah. And amazingly, and I love that, Dr. Walker, and I promise, I'm going to give you credit. The first 2 times I say it, I'm going to give you credit. After that, you know how us preachers are. I was in prayer, the Lord said. But that's really good. And here's the thing. If this whole thing of all lives matter and none of this is necessary, then why is at every election we're always talking about what is the Black agenda? Mm. Why are we at this point saying, okay, well, you know what? It was the Black vote that took Biden over. There's always a need. There's always been a need for us to separate out, because that's the way the country has treated us. That's how we got here. That's how our ancestors got here. And I think people are realizing, I'm 51. Oh my Lord, I can't believe I said that out loud. I'm 51. And we act like we got the right to vote 200 years ago. Mm. It was just a little bit before my lifetime.
I was here. It's 1964, 65. I was a baby. So I lived during the time of Jim Crow.
Imagine.
Yeah, I know.
And so we're talking as if we are 200 years removed, and that none of this stuff matters anymore. We're 200 years removed. This was just, and Dr. Green, you nailed it. It's a 60-year. We don't get that. It's a 60-year turnover before we see any. And so when he said, what's being done in those 60 years? We know what's being done in those 60 years. We're writing laws and creating situations that make whatever was put in place not feasible by the time we get there.
Right.
It's called systemic structural racism.
No, there's no such thing. No,
that's what happens.
Green, there's no such thing.
Well, you know what I thank God for? I thank God for Black women today.
Oh, why?
I thank God because the historic moment that we're in is not possible without Black women.
That's right.
It was Simone Sanders, a Black woman, who helped to resurrect Biden's struggling campaign before the primary.
Right.
She was Black women in South Carolina who gave Biden that primary win that actually solidified and re-energized his campaign. It's a Black woman on the ticket with him right now. Well, she was on the ticket. Now she's standing by his side.
There you go.
And then there's this other Black woman. I know you know who she is, brothers.
You all in my notes. Oh, Lord Jesus. This guy taking my questions. Stokes.
I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
Okay.
It's your show.
I know, but we'll go there because you're already there. So go ahead. Give it. Raise up Stacey.
So I'm just going to big up Stacey Abrams, because this brilliant Black woman has spent 2 years after her own defeat, if you will, reaching unregistered voters and then turning them out to vote in Georgia. Black women knocking on doors, Black women cooking sweet potato pies and collard greens and feeding poll workers just to give soul to tired and weary campaign staff. Mm-hmm. Black women have always stepped in. Yes, we got to separate it out because Black women keep on saving the day. They're the backbone of the Democratic Party. And so when you celebrate Joe Biden, you celebrate Kamala Harris, you also got to celebrate women.
That's right.
Black women, like Kamala said, Asian women, Latino women, all women who would dare to step forward. But we can't rest, though.
No, you can't rest.
You definitely can't rest.
So let me go here and Joe Biden said in his election acceptance speech, he said, the African American community stood up again for me.
Mm-hmm.
They always have my back and I'll have yours. What do you think about that? And do you think that we'll actually see Joe Biden having the backs of Black people more than just a line in a acceptance speach?
That's like Green taking, because he over there shivering. he about to shake out of his boots.
Go ahead.
You know, I appreciated President-elect Biden's comments.
Okay.
I'll say that. I appreciated his statement. I even appreciate the way he pounded the podium like a Black Baptist preacher. That you knew he was talking to you and he meant that thing. Because of our background as educated Black men, I will say this: quantify it.
Okay.
I want you to quantify it, because supporting the Democratic Party has almost become understood. This is something that you do as a Black person. It's almost an expectation of behavior. This is how you identify as a Black person. Of course, you're going to vote Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
We've always stood by him. Interesting. So moving forward in the future, how are you now going to quantify your statement?
And Green and I are in we're in lockstep.
Okay.
I am from the school of trust but verify.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great word from Ronald Reagan, of all people, right? Yeah, I trust you. I'm just going to verify what you're saying. And so, yeah, we have stuck by him. And he's had several gaffes. And people forget the gaffes he had when he was with President Obama.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he made several statements, and people who know him say, I have a friend of mine who's a personal friend of his, and he says, you know, but you have to just know him. He doesn't mean, Joe will just keep talking, and sometimes we'll be like, Joe, stop talking because you're going to say something in a minute. So I get that.
Mm-hmm.
The question here is, we're not looking for token positions.
Right.
We're not looking for I can't think of his name because you don't see him anywhere. The Secretary of HUD.
That would be Dr. Ben Carson, who
COVID Carson.
COVID Carson. That's right.
And here's the thing. You know what? Watch this. Ben Carson has saved my niece's life.
Okay.
He was her brain surgeon.
Oh my.
You don't want me to go? I cannot. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
In his own field. He is not a politician. So where he has, because I do a lot of work with housing, he has zero understanding about it. So I'm not looking for any token positions whatsoever. You said the Black community stood behind you. You're going to stand behind the Black community. I think a great start was Kamala Harris. It's a great start.
Right.
If anybody thinks that's it, I say quickly, that's a great start.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be people of color and people who understand the needs of people of color, because not everybody needs to be, Black or brown in the administration. I'm fine with that, but there's got to be people who understand our needs, who understand, like for instance, the Secretary of Education has to understand that education is not equal.
Mm.
You have to understand that so that we can have a real dialogue about how we fix things that are broken. And so I'm with Jaron. Okay, great, thank you. And I appreciated the pounding too. I was hitting here looking. I was like, man, he is meaning that thing. As a preacher, we know when we hitting that podium, which we're trying to say it even louder than you're hearing it, because we really feel it and believe what we're saying. And I'm like, okay, great. Now let's put some things into action. And not from the place of tokenism. But this whole idea, there's so many gifted people of color, they're everywhere. We're everywhere.
Right.
You need to find us. You need to put us in positions. And then you need to put those people in positions for greater positions in the government, even after your administration. It has to be systemic.
And then let's take it a step further, Brother Stevenson. Once those people, Black and brown people who are very qualified, are in position, they need to then reach back
Absolutely.
and pull up others who are just as qualified and continue to use the smarts, the intelligent, the charisma that we are known for to make change, not for a takeover, but for a true, I hate to use the word, integration. Loyalty. This is what he's really talking about when Biden pounds that podium. He's talking about loyalty, but loyalty happens through strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It has to happen through a strategic process, and this is exactly what we are describing right here. And it's not necessarily even about party loyalty. It's just, it has to happen through this very strategic, very intentional process of choosing the best candidates, not through what's the program that they say benefited Black people, but it really benefited
affirmative action.
I knew you knew what I was talking about.
I got 3 jobs that way.
Yeah.
but it's not just that. It's really giving candidates a fair shot, so that people who sit at the table understand how they got to the table, understand what they're supposed to do while they're sitting there, and when they get up, the table is better than when they first got there and left.
Absolutely. And one of those things has got to be a real reckoning and recognizing of Stacey Abrams.
Absolutely.
I'm going back to her name because what she has done is literally unbelievable.
Phenomenal.
Literally.
If you've ever heard the poem "A Phenomenal Woman," here is the perfect example. She took what would have been a loss, what some folks say is a loss, even though I'm pretty sure she won had they not suppressed the vote and cheated in Georgia as they did years ago. She took that loss and created a platform of influence. Real leadership is about influence. She has showed Georgia, this nation, and the world what a Black woman does. They lead.
Yes, Lord.
Doc Stevenson, I'm glad you went back to Stacey. So here's what I'm going to do, because I had here on my list, I was going to give both of you some words. I was just going to say a name, and I was going to just ask you to, whatever comes to your mind about that person. And of course, Stacey Abrams was on my list, just to give her name, and then whatever you said about her, we would listen to, but it's already been said. So since you said Stacey Abrams, here's a name: Jim Clyburn.
Influence.
Go ahead. You start, Tyrone, and then Jaron, you come behind him if you got.
There'd be no there'd be no Joe Biden. We would not be talking about South Carolina at all. That man stood up and literally he is the Martin Luther King of the Black vote in South Carolina. What Jim says,
right?
That's what it is. Yesterday he had an interview where they asked him. They said, "Well, why did you make that shift that you made?" And he said, literally, it was in a little church in South Carolina when President-elect Biden came to speak, and he said, a little old lady. He called the woman's name. That also says something. He called her name. Said she called me with her finger to come over to him. She said, "Come here. I want you to tell me who you're voting for." And she said, "If you don't want to say it loud, say it in my ear. Bend down and say it in my ear." He said, so I did what she said. I bent down and I told her I was voting for Joe Biden. And she said, this woman who otherwise would be unnamed and unknown, here we are again, a Black woman. She said, "I needed to hear you say that." And then she said, "South Carolina needs to hear you say that." He said it was that conversation. He said it was not Joe. It was not all that other stuff. It was that conversation with this woman, this old mother in the church, that then he got up. The next time he spoke, he said what he had to say about Joe Biden. And here we see South Carolina follow. his influence is he's an unsung hero that people need to start studying. I'm going to do more studying on him because he is the kingmaker of South Carolina.
Yes, he is.
He is.
I think that is so telling. I love that story that you just shared with us because Clyburn is not Neo. He's not a novice to this thing. He's been around. He's been in Congress since 1993.
Yeah.
For him to still take the advice of one of his constituents in a church house, an older Black woman, I'm sure, that says, it speaks volumes to this man's character who has now become a champion. If you look at his record, you will see how he's tried to do the right thing by his own district and by his state. And now, because of that, him doing the right thing down there in South Carolina, the whole nation hopefully will be on track for some major healing. He stood in the gap for rural development. Think about South Carolina. We're not talking about New York City here. He's looking out for his real people, rural development, economic development, and he's been doing it since 1993. And I believe that he's the third highest ranking Democrat at this time. And so, Clyburn, kingmaker.
Kingmaker. He's the man.
And I think this is probably, in my mind, the greater portion of what Jim Clyburn did. It's one thing to have power, but then he came to the conclusion in his own mind that he had the power to shift everybody else. Because sometimes you can have a position and not have enough internal power, integrity within yourself to step forward at a time when you need to step forward.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like he also had to agree, because the woman said, Jim, we needed to hear that from you, and South Carolina needs to hear that from you. But guess what? He could have sat on it.
He could have.
He could have sat on it. But he understood. You're right. And who else has a voice that will move this people that is well respected? And so sometimes you can have a voice and then be egotistical about it. Everybody gonna listen to what I say, so I want y'all to do this because I said so. No. He knew that there was value in his voice. He knew that there was persuasion for the betterment, for the better good of people and the system. So instead of hiding, he stood forward with the authority that was in his mouth. And guess what he said? We know Joe Biden, but more importantly, Joe Biden knows us.
And everything turned.
It turned on those couple of words right there.
That was
we know Joe. I think it was even short. He didn't even say Joe Biden. He said, we know Joe, and Joe knows us. And that was it.
And everybody was like, okay.
And that man, but then it went across the country.
Yep.
Because all the Democrats got in line after that.
After the saying, well, what we do know is we know Joe, and Joe knows us.
And knows us. And I also think, and I'm going to just throw this in parenthetically, I don't think that any other Democrat would have won. And I really believe that. And the reason why I say that is because I think that the Bernie Sanders, anybody else who was kind of far left, the middle of America, the right of America, those people who really wanted to not vote for Donald Trump, they would have stayed on that side. But I think because he was in the middle, he was known, you know what I'm saying? All those things that we know, I think he was palatable, tasteful for people who who really aren't Democrats, but needed a place to land because they didn't want to go with the current guy in there. And I think he was soft enough to say, I can live with voting for him, even though I'm not Democrat. And like the Cindy McCains and the Jeb Bushes, they needed some place to go.
Yep.
And they might not have went for a Bernie Sanders or someone who was far left. So anyway, that's just my opinion. on that. So let me.
You know what else I like about Clyburn?
Yeah,
I first learned really to start paying attention to him through Bakari Sellers. Bakari Sellers, you know, he's a CNN political analyst. He's a former policymaker. Everybody kind of knows this young rising star, Bakari Sellers, whose father, Cleveland Sellers, was a civil rights activist in his own right with SNCC. But Bakari Sellers spoke so well of Clyburn that it made me pay attention, and it made me think about my own kids. You know, pre-COVID, when you go send your kids to school, they're going to tell everything that happens at the house. I have a kindergartner, so I know. They're going to tell all the secrets and the stuff that you want them to share, and some stuff that you don't want anybody outside the house to know. But your sons will tell the truth on you. And
yes, they will.
For him to speak so highly of Clyburn, it made me pay attention. And then for Clyburn to rise to the occasion at this moment, he is another one who deserves an applause from us.
Yeah, Bakari has been a great source of information. He's a straight shooter. I enjoy listening to his commentary because when he speaks, one, it's thoughtful, and he has a great way of remaining speaking to us and not speaking past us. Bakari is an absolute rising star in the Democratic Party. Absolutely.
Here's I'm going to put these 4 words together, and when I give them to you, I want you to speak about these 4 words collectively. Here they go: Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. Can y'all speak to those 4 cities for me?
Well, one thing they all have in common.
They voted for Biden.
They voted for Biden. The next thing they have in common, the president can't stand them. And the third thing they have in common is they are majority cities of color.
Of color, yeah.
That have marshaled their vote, understand the power of their voice, and I think after this election, can never go back to even wanting to believe that their vote can't change the outcome of an entire election.
Absolutely.
It is crystal clear. My hope is that the Democratic Party, because I know the Republicans are going to do it, that the Democratic Party will absolutely regurgitate these numbers for years and years to come. We're not talking about, it sounds like a lot of people to somebody who might live in a small community, but I live in New York. When you say, he's going to win by 20,000 in New York, I'm like, okay, that's about 6 blocks.
Right.
That's about 6 blocks. So yeah, they're black, and nothing all have in common. All them states gonna get sued.
That's true. Doc Green.
So you know what you just said. Let me see if I can repeat it back. Detroit. Philadelphia. Atlanta. Milwaukee.
Yep.
Was there another one?
No, I only had those 4.
And you know what I heard when you were saying that?
What?
I heard opportunity.
Wow.
In every single city. An opportunity is a set of circumstances that makes it possible to do something. You know, a lot of people look at those cities and towns, they're cities. They look at those cities as places where there's lack of opportunity. But what I'm seeing is the flip side of that thing. Okay. An opportunity now for folks to say, I am going to do my civic duty, be part of this political process, be part of this cultural process, even if, a lot of people get discouraged, or they think that politics is daunting, not realizing that everything that we do, everything that governs us has policy attached to it. But if we can find Black folks in these cities of opportunity, just one thing to do, just one thing, whether it's running for an office, whether it's emailing, whether it's writing an editorial, whether it's sitting down and having a conversation with friends on a Zoom call, that could be your one thing that creates an opportunity for them to do what they just showed us they can do. They can flip stuff. They can turn it upside down. I feel like I'm reading the book of Acts here, turning the world upside down. Yes, opportunity, 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 no matter what set of circumstances may have been set before them. Now, of course, there's challenges, of course, absolutely. But I feel like there's more opportunity moving forward than what America probably had realized in those cities. I mean, Milwaukee, I mean, Detroit, I'm thinking of this ticker tape in my head of all the CNN breaking news headlines of all the bad things that have happened in these cities, and they would have been counted out, except opportunity knocked.
Now those cities need to invite, those cities, specifically people of color in power, need to invite the government to their table. Don't go to their table.
Right.
You need to say, now come to, because now we know who we are.
Right.
You need to come to our table, and now let's talk about what we're about to do with Flint. No more. I don't want to hear no more about, no. Number one, somebody's about to be held accountable.
Right.
And number two, you about to fix this water. We're not asking you, we're telling you. Because if it doesn't happen, if we don't see change, now there's the politics of it. If we don't see change, we will find someone who will adhere to what needs to be done here. I think it's one of the failures of the Obama administration. And I have been very vocal about it. I'm never the person that says, well, because, like, for instance, Joe Biden is a Democrat. So, no, Joe Biden can be wrong just like anybody else.
Everybody.
President Obama was wrong on things just like anybody else. That's an area that we should have marshaled the resources of this country. If all lives mattered, going back, if all lives mattered, we wouldn't have to talk about that, because if water was bad, there's an area here in Long Island where they found that the water was bad because all their water comes from underground. And so they found the water is bad. Well, guess what? There was no big conversation about it. It was like, okay, we tested it, the water's bad, shut down the water, remove all the pipes, let's put in new pipes. Until then, provide water for everybody. Anything else y'all need? That was the whole conversation.
Wow.
That was the whole conversation. You never heard it on the news. Unless you live here, you didn't hear it on the news, because you can't give people bad water to drink. So we need to now take what Dr. Green has said, opportunity, and now I don't subscribe to going to their table.
Right.
We've made a table. Come to our table so we can tell you what it is we want done, and we're going to hold you accountable to it.
Oh, I hear that old church mother in my spirit saying, come over here where the table is spread and the feast of the Lord is going on. Listen, come over here. Listen, this table has been set before us in the presence of our enemies. I like that. I'm going to use that, Brother Stevenson, because I'm going to use that, and I'm not giving you no credit.
See, I like that. He's an honest preacher.
Yeah. And, the irony of those four cities, Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Atlanta, in the presidential election, or I should say in the presidential race of 2016, Donald Trump said to Black America, what do you have to lose? And it's ironic that the election this year came down to those four areas, because the last 3-4 days, Detroit, Michigan, in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, Milwaukee, and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Atlanta is not settled yet, but they have the lead. And that election actually swung on Black communities in favor of Joe Biden. So I think that they answered the question, Donald Trump, what do we have to lose? And that's why they said, we want Joe Biden.
What do we have to lose? You.
So let me ask this question. As you know, based on, I just brought up Atlanta, and there are 2 Senate races that are still open in Atlanta. And obviously, we know one is a preacher. Reverend Warnock is running in that one of those runoffs, and those two races will determine the power in the Senate. What are your feelings on the upcoming runoffs in Atlanta, or in Georgia, I should say?
I'm excited about. I am excited. I would hope that we can do the right thing. I wish that I was a Georgian resident right about now. Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock is his name. He is the successor of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a candidate for United States Senate, and he is a worthy candidate. Dr. King said once in an article that we cannot rest. Our laurels haven't been earned yet. We can't rest. And so while we do celebrate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and opportunity and all these wonderful things this side heard around the world, the race in Georgia is so close. This is another point that we probably could have touched on a little bit. Okay. The race was so close in Georgia that there has to be a special runoff, a runoff on January 5th, 2021, a rematch for a decisive win. You talk about not being able to rest. Brother Stevenson said that this is just the beginning. I'll save the rest of my sermon, but I'll say this: we must work while it is day. I'm a proud member of Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Raphael Warnock is my fraternal brother, just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've donated my 1906 so that he can make sure he got my support, and that continues to go weekly, monthly, however long we need. He gonna get them $1906 so that he can win this race. And if everybody does just a little bit of something like that, I think that we could end up with a good outcome for him and for the other gentleman who's a Democrat trying to secure his seat in the Senate as well.
John Ossoff, young guy, yes. Who ran last term and lost by a very small margin. So he's run again, and the incumbent refuses to debate him. And so he's put forth an opportunity for 2 or 3 debates between now and the runoff, and the incumbent is still refusing to debate him. I actually believe that there ought to be some changes, whether that be state wide or federally wide, that I don't see how you can refuse a debate. How else will the people know what your thoughts are and your beliefs? There's got to be a debate. Otherwise, all you're doing is talking to your own people, which keeps us divided. Which keeps us divided. We're in a strange place because, and since we're just talking, and I'm just some of my friends here, I have been asking myself, with the division of the country, I'm gonna brace myself as I say this. With the division of the country, man, let me talk about me. Do I want the House, the Senate, and the presidency in the hands of one party? I have been thinking this thing through hard because there's no need for negotiating when I control everything.
True that.
And without negotiation, our country is going to be. I mean, look at the numbers: 70 million and 74 million. 74. He still got 70 million people that voted for him.
Yes, he did.
And so the challenge is, I certainly can't see. I'll be okay with us keeping them all if McConnell remains the majority leader, because he refuses to negotiate. He's not a fair person. Forget him and his politics. He's not a moral person, which is really how I feel about Donald Trump. Forget everything else. There's no character there, and character matters. And there's got to be there's got to be a willingness to negotiate fairly. And I don't think we have that in the leadership of the Republican Party in the Senate. And so Warnock, I think, would bring such a dynamic diversity to the conversation. Forget everything else, just that he's on the ground with the people who need it. That would bring about a change. And I believe that the incumbent, the woman who's running she's extremely wealthy. I'm trying to get it, but she's extremely wealthy.
Kelly Loeffler is her name.
Yeah, Loeffler. She's extremely wealthy, and I get that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. In Georgia, where my wife's from Georgia, where you can literally go from where my wife's family, they own a great deal of land, and so we'll walk around the land and we'll talk about the days of slavery, and they tell the stories, and you can literally go down the road and turn the corner and see shacks.
Wow.
It's the most unbelievable thing. Like, literally go across railroad tracks 2020 and see little rickety houses with steel, the grated roof. Gotcha. And so there's a need for some serious work in the rural areas of our country that the Democrats cannot ignore.
You mentioned Mitch McConnell, and that's where I was going head after you said what you said about, there should be room for negotiation when you have a negotiator. What we have, however, is a Grim Reaper. Yes. Instead of a negotiator. We've got somebody with a track record who thwarts economic, social, and racial justice. He denies climate change. He squanders budget. There's tax breaks for the rich. He is everything, and I really call him the puppet master. Everything that Trump was blamed for, there's somebody behind the scenes who are pulling the strings, and his name is Mitch McConnell, amongst others. And so if a win in Georgia of these 2 Senate seats will move him out of the way and then allow Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to be that decisive vote where there might be a tie, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Is it ideal? No. However, what has been ideal?
Yeah. Well, if the Democrats win both Senate races, then it will be 50-50, and Kamala will always be the deciding vote. So what's at stake is they can't win one of two, they must win both in order to get 50-50. If I think Warnock is going to win pretty, I think he has a greater chance with running against her. So it may end up on a split. It may end up 51-49. And if Ossoff doesn't win, he's running against a tougher opponent. Doesn't mean that it's not possible, but I think his is tougher. But they have to win both in order to get the majority. So we want to bring this conversation to a close, and I want to thank both of you for the time that you have given this audience. This is a great conversation. So the question is, what's next, and where do Black people go from here? And I'll start with you, Pastor Green.
What's next, and where do we go? Well, because I'm a pastor, I'm going to say we have to pray.
Okay.
We have to pray, but then faith without works is dead. We have to get involved in the political process. And I'm just going to say it again. It's not always running for an office, but there are many meetings that you can attend where your voice can be heard. The vote may be over for the presidential election, but there are more elections to come. There's smaller elections, there's special elections. Make your voice heard, become educated on every single topic in your town. If there are bumpy roads in your town, you go and sit at the city development meeting and you have your questions answered, make your voice heard and known. Be actively engaged in the life of this country. And it all politics, they say, is local. Get involved in your locale. Get involved. Have conversations with people who don't think the same as you, even if it's just for 30 seconds. I mean, just give them a chance. You can delete them from your Facebook later. That's fine. But just get involved, stay abreast of what's going on around you. And if by chance there's an opportunity for you to step up in some way, some capacity to represent your train of thought, your Christianity, your faith, your morality, by all means, don't be afraid. Get out there and do it. sit on somebody's advisory committee, get on somebody's board, make public comments, write your editorials in the newspaper. They're always looking for content. Get involved, pray and work. Ask for God's help. Don't call for African angels because you might get something different.
You see, you ain't right. You ain't right.
Pray, 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 and then get up and work, work, work. That's what I have to say.
Reverend Stevenson.
That was good, Dr. Green. We made it all the way through without bringing up that.
Uh-huh.
I think we would have went way off. I would have probably been cussing. I do have a cussing.
Well, listen, we can do a part 2 if we need to.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's for something. One, I echo what Jaron is saying. It's extremely important we get involved. I want to see us set our own agenda. I want to see us set the agenda for our people. One of the things that I think we need to do is we got to get the results. Once we have the results of the census, we have to use the results of this census to set in motion a real agenda for the next decade for people of color. We've got to do something to confront the voter suppression in our communities, because it's going to. I can assure you, it's going to be on fire after all of this dies down. Voter suppression, the strategy of voter suppression, because now they know this is for real. The strategy around voter suppression is going to be real. It's going to be worse than it has been. We got to do something around the issue of voter suppression. And I think the thing that we can do the greatest of, and I know that there's prayer, and I think our pastors have got to step up and utilize their voice. We have to use our voice. I never tell my people who to vote for. I just preach the scripture. And the scripture kind of lays out some really clear principles. I'm willing to have conversations with people in our church. We have these kind of conversations since we've been in this lock-in environment. Just having those tough conversations, and be willing to bring in those politicians and hold them accountable. So no, you can't come to my church and use my pulpit when you're running for office. The politicians in New York know this about my church. You cannot come to my church during election season if I haven't seen you in my church at least 5 or 6 times, period. Don't even ask, because the answer is no. And so I think that we have to now start owning our power. And I believe this again, I'm going to say it again. We have to stop going to everybody's table, and we have to make our table and then invite them to our table, which means we have to organize. We have to organize. Everything that we're seeing happening right now is because we organized. And I think we have to take it to the next level. I think we can't just do, if we don't bring out if they don't bring out the machine in Georgia the way they did in this one, all we're gonna have is a president who is handcuffed for the next 4 years. And he's going to be handcuffed for 4 years, and Donald Trump is going to be out in the public square with a megaphone telling his 70 million people what's wrong with everything being done. We have to change that dynamic, and it's going to come through organization. Gotta organize.
I want to take the time to thank both of you for being on the show today. This was an outstanding conversation, sharing about this current election. And, what I want to say is I hope the best for America. I know that there are Democrats, there are Republicans, there are independents. Whatever you are, whatever your persuasion is, whatever your religion is, your faith is, your race. Here's the one thing that I want for America. I want America to kind of find a better place. I've heard this term recently called our better angels. I think we can get along better. And I know that's, with 400 years of racial strife, those are high ideals I have. But I think we can get better. And hopefully, when we don't have such toxicity coming from the head, what's the old saying? If the head is rotten, the whole body is rotten, right? So far, at least initially, President-elect Biden is trying to offer peace, offer collaboration. You know, he says he's going to president for all of America. And I think those things are is the way we should go, because as Dr. Green said, you got a little kindergartner coming up. I got a couple of grandbabies coming up, and we don't want the world to be worse than what it is for us. We want it to be better. So we have to find a way to get along, have debates, have competition. All that is healthy, but there's no need in us being enemies to each other where we just can't, stand to be around each other. We're looking to backstab and get back and be destructive. That's the devil. Let's live a godly life, and I think America is going to be better. And I want to thank Dr. Green for being on today. I want to thank Dr. Stevenson for being on today. And as I say to all of my guests, you have gone beyond the culture, and I truly appreciate you for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
All right, guys, and you take care. Now, if you want to continue to hear inspiring interviews like the one you heard today, I want you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Also, rate the show and please leave a comment. I would also love it if you would share this podcast with your friends to let them know that we're on. Finally, please go to our website at www.beyondtheculturepodcast.com, or you can email me at beyondtheculturepodcast@gmail.com. On the website, you can subscribe to the show and connect with me by leaving your email address. I'd love to hear from you. This is your host, Dr. David Walker, and we'll talk again on Beyond the Culture. Take care.